Kyushu, Japan, July 28, 1945, 0600 hours. Lieutenant Colonel Takashi Yamamoto, in command of the 147th Transport Regiment, remained entirely unaware that 8 M2/M2 50 caliber machine guns were poised to transform his entire procession into a scene of fiery devastation during a single catastrophic pass. The early morning mist clung tenaciously to the serpentine mountain path, winding between Kagoshima and Miyazaki. His convoy, comprising 47 trucks laden with vital ammunition and rice, snaked for almost 2 kilometers through the valley. Yamamoto harbored a belief that the early hour would shield them from the American fighter bombers that had relentlessly harried Japanese supply lines since the fall of Okinawa 3 months prior. His column advanced with deliberate slowness through the pre-dawn gloom, their headlights extinguished and engines subdued. Each driver maintained a precise interval, just enough to discern the vehicle ahead, when suddenly the resonant drone of twin Pratt and Whitney R-2800 engines echoed ominously off the sheer mountain walls. The Douglas A-26B Invader, hurtling at 322 miles per hour, belonged to the 438th Squadron of the 119th Bombardment Group. This unit had only arrived at Makinato Airfield on Okinawa a mere week earlier, on July 21, 1945, having completed their conversion from B-26 Marauders to these formidable new attack bombers at Columbia Army Air Base in South Carolina. The pilot, Captain James Mitchell of Oklahoma, had been thoroughly briefed that Japanese convoys were utilizing the mountainous terrain of southern Kyushu to transport supplies during the night and early morning hours, desperately attempting to evade the devastating assaults that had already decimated hundreds of vehicles across the home islands. What set this particular morning apart was the unprecedented concentration of forward firepower carried by Mitchell's A-26B, the most potent ever integrated onto an American attack aircraft. 8 M2/M2 50 caliber machine guns, packed tightly into the solid nose, unleashed projectiles at a rate of 750 to 850 rounds per minute each. Supplementing these were 6 additional 50 caliber guns in the wings, collectively achieving a firing rate approaching 11,900 rounds per minute when all 14 guns discharged simultaneously. Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto first registered the approaching engines at 0600 hours and 3 minutes, immediately ordering his drivers to veer off the road and seek concealment. However, the narrow mountain defile offered no egress, trapping the convoy in a perfectly defined kill zone that spanned 2,000 meters. The Japanese had, over 3 years of incessant American aerial bombardments, learned that their most effective defense was to scatter and find cover. Yet, on this fateful morning, the very terrain that had previously concealed them now served as their tomb. Yamamoto watched in mounting dread as the twin-engine aircraft descended from an altitude of 8,000 feet to less than 500 feet in a controlled power dive. Its nose pointed directly at the lead vehicle, where Sergeant Major Kenji Nakamura sat, his hands frozen on the steering wheel of a Type 94 truck, which was burdened with 7,000 pounds of artillery shells destined for the coastal defense batteries near Miyazaki. The solid nose configuration of the A-26B had been a deliberate design choice by Douglas Aircraft Company's Long Beach facility, engineered to maximize forward ordnance delivery for precisely this type of ground assault mission. The 8 nose-mounted guns were arranged in 4 vertical rows along the aircraft's center line. This configuration, coupled with the 6 wing-mounted guns firing clear of the propeller arc, empowered Captain Mitchell to unleash what American pilots termed a wall of lead in a single firing pass. This eliminated the need for him to circle and execute multiple runs, thus minimizing his exposure to Japanese anti-aircraft defenses. The Japanese had strategically placed Type 96 25mm anti-aircraft cannons at intervals of a few kilometers along their principal supply routes, and Yamamoto's convoy included 2 trucks specifically equipped with these formidable weapons. However, the gunners possessed less than 15 seconds from the moment they first spotted the descending invader until it unleashed its devastating payload. At 0600 hours and 30 seconds, Captain Mitchell actuated the trigger on his control yoke, and all 14 M2/M250 caliber machine guns erupted in unison, causing the entire 27,000-pound aircraft to recoil violently from the sheer force of the discharge. the concentrated firepower emanating from 14 50 caliber machine guns, expending armor-piercing incendiary rounds at a combined rate nearing 200 rounds per second, forged a cone of destruction from which no ground target could possibly survive. Each M2/M2 50 caliber machine gun was armed with a linked belt pattern of M2 ball, M1 incendiary, and M8 armor-piercing incendiary ammunition, a meticulously refined combination honed over 3 years of arduous Pacific combat. The projectiles streaked towards the convoy at an astonishing velocity of 2,900 feet per second. Sergeant Major Nakamura had no opportunity to react. 1,735 50 caliber rounds tore through his truck in a mere 1.2 seconds, igniting the artillery shells within. A colossal explosion ensued, propelling the 6-ton vehicle 15 feet into the air and sending a towering column of fire and smoke 300 feet skyward. The concussive blast wave toppled soldiers who had disembarked and were attempting to reach the tree line. Meanwhile, incandescent shell fragments raked across the next 3 trucks in the procession, igniting their cargoes of rice and ammunition. Private First Class Hiroshi Tanaka, positioned in the 4th truck, watched in stunned paralysis as the American aircraft's nose seemed to ignite with the muzzle flashes of 14 machine guns, creating an effect akin to a solid bar of fire spanning the entire frontal aspect of the aircraft. The unparalleled effectiveness of the A-26B's concentrated firepower stemmed from the precise synchronization of all 14 guns aiming at a single focal point. Douglas engineers had meticulously achieved this through careful bore sighting and harmonization, establishing a convergence point at 1,000 feet. Consequently, at Captain Mitchell's attack altitude of 400 feet, the streams of bullets from all 14 guns formed an oval pattern approximately 30 feet wide and 15 feet high, saturating any target within this zone with an overwhelming barrage of approximately 198 pounds of projectiles every second. The Japanese had never before encountered such a high density of automatic weapons fire from a single aircraft. Even the formidable Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was armed with only 8 50 caliber guns, and the majority of American fighters operating in the Pacific Theater mounted 6 at most. Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto desperately attempted to organize defensive fire from his 2 anti-aircraft vehicles. However, the lead gun truck sustained 47 hits directly on its ammunition ready racks before its crew could even traverse their weapon, triggering a sympathetic detonation that instantly killed all 4 gunners. The second gun truck, situated near the convoy's midpoint, managed to discharge 17 rounds before 93 50 caliber bullets shredded its gun mount, the gunner, and the truck's engine block within a mere 0.8 seconds. Private Yukio Sato, manning the second gun position, survived just long enough to witness the American aircraft's nose appear to explode with light before his position was obliterated by the concentrated barrage from 14 synchronized machine guns. The twin Pratt & Whitney R-282 7 double Wasp engines powering Mitchell's A-26B, each generating 2,000 horsepower, endowed the aircraft with exceptional speed and climb performance. This capability facilitated the execution of what American pilots termed one-pass and haul-ass attacks. This tactic had been specifically developed to minimize exposure to Japanese anti-aircraft fire, which had escalated in lethality as the Japanese concentrated increasingly potent automatic weapons along their critical supply arteries. The 319th Bombardment Group had rigorously practiced these tactics at Columbia Army Air Base since February 1945. There, pilots were trained to approach targets at high altitudes to evade detection, execute steep dives to achieve maximum velocity, level off at minimum altitude for the firing pass, and then utilize the invaders' impressive top speed of 359 miles per hour to effect a rapid escape before enemy gunners could react. As Mitchell's aircraft thundered over the convoy at 320 miles per hour and an altitude of 400 feet, his navigator and gunloader, Second Lieutenant Robert Thompson, observed through the side windows the complete disintegration of the Japanese column under the relentless onslaught. The A-26B's substantial ammunition load of 6,000 rounds permitted Mitchell to sustain continuous firing for approximately 30 seconds. However, pilots typically employed firing bursts of only 3 to 5 seconds to prevent overheating of the gun barrels. In this particular engagement, Mitchell held the trigger down for an extended 4.7 seconds, expending roughly 930 rounds that transformed the mountain road into what Thompson would later vividly describe as a river of fire and twisted metal. Corporal Masaru Watanabe, driving the 12th truck in the convoy, had just enough time to hurl himself from the cab before 211 50 caliber rounds reduced his vehicle to scrap metal and ignited the 5,000 pounds of aviation gasoline stored in 55-gallon drums in the rear. The resulting fireball enveloped 3 adjacent trucks and set the surrounding forest ablaze, creating an impassable wall of flame that effectively trapped the rear portion of the convoy. Watanabe, sprawled in a drainage ditch with his uniform smoldering, witnessed the American aircraft execute a sharp climb at the conclusion of its pass, its twin radial engines roaring as it ascended at an angle that appeared improbable for such a substantial aircraft. The 319th Bombardment Group had been specifically selected for conversion to the A-26B Invader due to their extensive combat experience in the Mediterranean theater, where they had successfully completed 515 missions in Martin B, 26 Marauders, and earned 2 distinguished unit citations for their precision bombing of marshalling yards in Rome and Florence. Colonel Joseph R. Holtzapfel, who had commanded the 319th since August 1943, had overseen the conversion training at Columbia Army Air Base, where his crews mastered the deployment of the Invaders' unique combination of speed, firepower, and maneuverability in the ground attack role. The group's 4 squadrons, the 437th, 438th, 439th, and 440th, had embarked from San Francisco in May 1945 aboard the USS General John Pope, arriving at Okinawa in early July, coinciding with the commencement of the massive buildup for Operation Olympic. The planned invasion of Japan, Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto, bleeding from multiple shrapnel wounds and partially deafened by the explosions, attempted to assess his surviving vehicles amidst the acrid smoke and roaring flames. Of the 47 trucks that had entered the mountain pass, 31 were now burning wrecks. An additional 8 were heavily damaged and abandoned, leaving only 8 vehicles still operational. The human toll was even more devastating than the material losses. 143 soldiers perished instantly, another 87 sustained injuries, and the convoy's precious cargo of ammunition, fuel, and food was almost entirely annihilated. In just 4.7 seconds of concentrated fire from 14 M2/M250 caliber machine guns, a solitary A-26B Invader had effectively rendered an entire Japanese transport regiment defunct. The psychological impact of such assaults on Japanese forces cannot be overstated. Major General Toshiro Nagai, commanding the 57th Division in southern Kyushu, recorded in his personal diary on July 29, 1945, that the enemy's new attack bombers, with their concentrated forward guns, have made daylight movement impossible and are systematically destroying our ability to supply the coastal defenses. The Japanese had been subjected to American air superiority since 1943. However, the arrival of the A-26B Invader, boasting 14 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns, represented a quantum leap in ground attack capability for which Japanese forces were utterly unprepared. The technical superiority of the M2/M250 caliber machine gun, the standard American aircraft armament of World War II, provided the A-26B with a devastating advantage over Japanese ground forces. Each gun discharged a projectile weighing 1.7 pounds at a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second, delivering approximately 13,000 foot-pounds of kinetic energy upon impact. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds possessed the capability to penetrate 1 inch of face-hardened steel at 500 yards, while the incendiary rounds were designed to ignite fuel, ammunition, and other combustible materials on contact. When 14 of these formidable weapons fired simultaneously in a precisely synchronized pattern, their destructive potential multiplied exponentially. Captain Mitchell's devastating attack on Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto's convoy was merely one of 22 missions undertaken by the 319th Bombardment Group against Japanese targets between July 16 and August 14, 1945. Operating from Makinado Airfield on Okinawa, The group's A-26B Invaders ranged across southern Japan and occupied China, targeting airfields, rail yards, port facilities, and supply convoys in anticipation of the impending invasion of the Japanese home islands. The strategic proximity of Okinawa to Kyushu, a mere 350 miles distant, enabled the invaders to strike targets throughout southern Japan and return to base with ample fuel reserves, allowing for extended loiter periods over target areas in pursuit of targets of opportunity. The A-26B's defensive armament also rendered it a formidable adversary for Japanese interceptors, featuring remotely controlled dorsal and ventral turrets, each equipped with twin M2/M250 caliber machine guns. These turrets were operated by a single gunner, Sergeant Thomas Anderson in Mitchell's aircraft, who occupied a compartment situated behind the bomb bay and utilized a sophisticated periscope sighting system. The General Electric remote control system enabled Anderson to track targets smoothly as they traversed the aircraft's upper and lower defensive hemispheres, with the guns automatically compensating for parallax and bullet drop. Despite its complexity and demanding maintenance requirements, this system bestowed upon the A-26B comprehensive all-around defensive coverage without the inherent weight and drag penalties associated with traditional manned turrets. Private First Class Akira Yamashita, one of only 12 unwounded survivors from the vanguard of Yamamoto's convoy, later testified to American interrogators that the assault occurred with such blinding speed that most soldiers had absolutely no chance to seek cover. The aircraft materialized as if from nowhere, diving out of the morning sun. And before we could even comprehend, the entire front of the column was engulfed in explosions and fire. The sound was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Not the distinct crack of rifle fire, nor even the stutter of a machine gun, but a continuous roar like a giant piece of canvas being torn apart. Vehicles simply disintegrated under the impact of so many heavy bullets, and men were cut down where they stood. The remarkable concentration of firepower achieved by the A-26B's 14 forward-firing guns was a direct consequence of lessons learned during 3 years of Pacific combat. American pilots had discovered that Japanese vehicles and fortifications were often more robustly constructed than initial intelligence estimates had suggested. The standard armament of 8.50 caliber guns found on the Republic P-51, Mustang or the Grumman F-6F Hellcat could effectively destroy lightly armored vehicles and suppress anti-aircraft positions, but frequently required multiple passes to ensure the destruction of more heavily fortified targets. The A-26B's 14-gun armament delivered 2.3 times the firepower of a standard 6-gun fighter in a single pass, dramatically enhancing the probability of target destruction while simultaneously minimizing exposure to return fire. The day following the devastating attack on Yamamoto's convoy, Japanese engineers from the 54th Independent Engineer Regiment arrived to commence the arduous task of clearing the wreckage and repairing the road. Lieutenant Keizo Tanaka, commanding the engineer detachment, reported that the destruction was so absolute that individual vehicles were rendered unrecognizable, with trucks fused together by the intense heat generated from burning fuel and ammunition. The road surface itself was pockmarked with craters from exploding ordnance and scored by thousands of 50 caliber bullet impacts, necessitating extensive reconstruction before it could be reopened for traffic. More ominously, Tanaka noted that the precision and sheer concentration of the attack strongly suggested that American intelligence possessed highly accurate information regarding Japanese convoy routes and schedules. Indeed, American intelligence gathering operations had attained a sophisticated level by July 1945. Signals intelligence derived from intercepted Japanese radio communications, comprehensive aerial reconnaissance conducted by F-13 photo reconnaissance variants of the B-29 Superfortress, and crucial information provided by Filipino and Chinese guerrillas all contributed to a remarkably detailed understanding of Japanese military movements. The intelligence officer for the 319th Bombardment Group, Major William Harrison, maintained meticulously updated maps of Japanese supply routes throughout Kyushu, with information augmented daily from 7th Air Force headquarters. This robust intelligence framework empowered American planners to predict, with a high degree of accuracy, when and where Japanese convoys would be most vulnerable to interdiction. The specific tactical advantages offered by the A-26B Invader over its predecessors became increasingly evident during the 3 weeks of combat operations preceding Japan's eventual surrender. The aircraft's superior cruise speed of 322 miles per hour, a significant improvement over the 275 miles per hour of the A-20 Havoc it replaced, afforded Japanese anti-aircraft gunners considerably less time to acquire and engage attacking aircraft. The Invader's twin Pratt & Whitney R-2 engines, identical power plants used in the Republic, P-47 Thunderbolt, and the Grumman F-6F Hellcat, were renowned for their exceptional reliability and remarkable resilience, capable of absorbing substantial battle damage. Numerous instances were recorded of A-26s returning to base with one engine rendered inoperable and the other severely damaged. Master Sergeant Jiro Kawasaki, commanding a Type 96 25mm anti-aircraft battery positioned near Miyazaki, reported to his superiors that the new American attack bombers were essentially impervious to effective engagement with manually operated anti-aircraft weaponry. They approach at high altitudes where our 25mm guns cannot reach, he stated, then dive at speeds exceeding 500 kilometers per hour. By the time we can traverse our weapons to track them, they have completed their attack and are climbing away at maximum power. The concentration of their forward firepower is so intense that any position targeted is destroyed before it can return effective fire. The psychological warfare component of the A-26B's offensive operations cannot be disregarded. The distinctive sonic signature of 14 synchronized M2/M250 caliber machine guns firing in unison, described by Japanese survivors as a ripping or tearing sound that could be heard even above the cacophony of explosions and aircraft engines, instilled profound terror within Japanese transport units. Colonel Masahiro Fujiwara, chief of logistics for the Japanese 16th Area Army in Kyushu, noted in a post-war interrogation that by early August 1945, Japanese truck drivers were increasingly reluctant to move during daylight hours, with many deserting their posts rather than face the certain death associated with American aerial attacks. On August 9, 1945, crews from the 319th Bombardment Group witnessed one of the most momentous events in human history when they observed the colossal atomic cloud ascending over Nagasaki while returning from a mission targeting the Kanoya airfield in southern Kyushu. Captain Mitchell, piloting his 23rd combat mission in the Pacific, later recalled, "We were at about 12,000 feet when we saw this enormous cloud rising to the northwest. It must have been 40,000 feet high and still climbing. We didn't know what it was at the time, but it was unlike anything any of us had ever seen. This cataclysmic event would ultimately prove to be one of the final dramatic acts of World War II, with Japan formally announcing its unconditional surrender just 6 days later, on August 15, 1945. The technological evolution that culminated in the A-26B's devastatingly potent firepower configuration had its genesis in 1941. It was then that Douglas Aircraft Company received a requirement from the U.S. Army Air Corps for a new attack bomber, designed to supersede both the Douglas A-20 Havoc and the Martin B-26 Marauder. The design team, spearheaded by Ed Heinemann, Robert Donovan, and Ted R. Smith, conceived an innovative aircraft capable of adaptation for diverse mission profiles through interchangeable nose sections. The initial XA-26 prototype, bearing serial number 41195088, successfully flew, equipped with a 75mm cannon mounted in the nose. However, subsequent testing revealed that the cannon's slow rate of fire and its propensity to jam rendered this configuration impractical for the high-speed, low-level assaults characteristic of Pacific theater operations. Extended testing, incorporating various combinations of 37mm cannons and 50-caliber machine guns, ultimately led to the standardization of the 6-gun, and subsequently the 8-gun solid-nose configuration that became the hallmark of production A-26Bs. The 8-gun nose configuration, introduced with the A-26B 50DL production block, manufactured at Douglas's Long Beach facility, represented the utmost practical density of firepower achievable within the aerodynamic and weight limitations of the aircraft's design. When coupled with the 6 wing-mounted guns, 3 in each wing firing beyond the propeller's arc, The result was an aircraft capable of delivering more concentrated automatic weapon fire than any other single- or two-seat aircraft in the American arsenal. The manufacturing process for the A-26B mirrored the industrial might of American wartime production, with Douglas Aircraft Company producing 1,355 A-26B variants between 1943 and 1945 at facilities in Long Beach, California, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. Each aircraft required approximately 24,000 man-hours to construct, with the 8-gun nose assembly alone necessitating precision, boring, and alignment of 8.5 caliber gun mounts, ammunition feed systems, and spent case ejection chutes. The nose guns were arranged in 4 vertical columns of 2 guns each, with meticulous attention paid to spacing and alignment to prevent interference between adjacent guns during firing. Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto, recovering from his injuries at Kagoshima Army Hospital, submitted a report to Imperial General Headquarters on August 3, 1945, detailing the assault on his convoy and its implications for Japanese defensive preparations. He observed that conventional passive defense strategies such as camouflage, dispersal, and nighttime movement were no longer effective against an adversary possessing near-absolute air supremacy and aircraft capable of delivering such intense firepower. His recommendation to halt all supply movements during daylight hours and to triple anti-aircraft defenses along major supply arteries arrived too late to be implemented before the war's conclusion. The impact of the A-26B Invader on Japanese military planning in the war's final weeks extended beyond the immediate annihilation of supplies and vehicles. Lieutenant General Osamu Yokoyama, responsible for the defense of northern Kyushu, reported to Imperial General Headquarters that the systematic disruption of transportation capabilities by American aerial assaults, particularly by the new heavily armed attack bombers, had rendered it impossible to adequately provision the coastal defense positions being prepared for the anticipated American invasion. Without sufficient trucks to transport ammunition, provisions, and reinforcements, the extensive defensive installations being erected along the invasion beaches would become nothing more than death traps for their occupants. The human toll of attacks such as the one on Yamamoto's convoy was staggering for Japanese forces already depleted by years of conflict and increasingly cut off from resupply and reinforcements. Medical Officer Captain Hiroshi Nakamura, treating the wounded from the July 28th attack, reported that the injuries inflicted by .50 caliber bullets were particularly devastating, with the high-velocity rounds causing extensive tissue damage and frequently resulting in traumatic limb amputations. The incendiary effect of the armor-piercing incendiary rounds also led to severe burns, with many casualties succumbing to a combination of blast trauma, burns, and blood loss before they could receive medical attention. The technological superiority embodied by the A-26B Invader was merely one facet of the overwhelming material advantage enjoyed by American forces in the concluding months of World War II. By July 1945, the United States Army Air Forces had deployed over 7,000 combat aircraft to bases within striking distance of the Japanese home islands, including 592 B-29 superfortresses for strategic bombing, over 1,000 P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts for escort and ground attack missions, and now the A-26B Invaders of the 31st Bombardment Group for specialized ground attack operations. Against this aerial armada, the Japanese could field fewer than 5,000 aircraft of all types, the majority of which were being conserved for kamikaze attacks against the anticipated invasion fleet. The specific technical advantages of the M250 caliber machine gun, which made it so effective in the A-26B's concentrated forward firepower configuration, included its high rate of fire, exceptional dependability, and the availability of specialized ammunition types for varied targets. The standard M2 ball round could penetrate light armor and aircraft skins at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards. The M1 incendiary round contained a small quantity of incendiary material that ignited upon impact, igniting fuel tanks, ammunition stores, and other combustible materials. The M8 armor-piercing incendiary round combined both functionalities with a hardened steel core for penetration and an incendiary element for secondary damage. Second Lieutenant Thompson Mitchell's navigator and gun loader bore the responsibility of ensuring the nose gun ammunition feeds remained unobstructed during combat operations. The 8 nose-mounted M2s each possessed individual ammunition boxes containing 400 rounds in linked belts, with spent cases and links ejected through chutes in the bottom of the nose section. The complexity of routing 8 ammunition feeds through the confined space of the nose compartment, while maintaining proper alignment and preventing malfunctions demanded meticulous engineering and continuous upkeep. Ground crews of the 31st Bombardment Group's 438th Squadron typically dedicated 4 hours to preparing an A-26B for a mission, with a significant portion of that time allocated to loading ammunition and verifying the gun systems. The defensive capabilities of the A-26B, while secondary to its offensive armament, were nevertheless substantial. Sergeant Anderson, the gunner aboard Mitchell's aircraft, managed both the dorsal and ventral turrets via an innovative periscope system that automatically shifted between turrets as he tracked targets moving from the upper to lower hemispheres. Each turret was equipped with 2 M250 caliber machine guns, each carrying 250 rounds, providing comprehensive defensive coverage. Although few Japanese fighters challenged the invaders during their 3 weeks of combat operations, the presence of the defensive turrets compelled any interceptors to approach from the forward quadrant, where they faced the devastating firepower of 14 forward-firing guns. The maintenance demands for keeping the A-26B's intricate weapon systems operational under the severe conditions of Okinawa during the summer of 1945 posed a significant challenge to the ground crews of the 31st Bombardment Group. The combination of high humidity, salty air, and coral dust necessitated daily cleaning and lubrication of all 14 forward-firing guns, in addition to the 4 turret guns. Chief Master Sergeant Ronald Patterson, heading the armament section of the 438th Squadron, instituted a stringent maintenance schedule requiring each gun to be removed, completely disassembled, cleaned, and test-fired every 5 missions or 50 hours of flight time, whichever milestone was reached first. Japanese efforts to counteract the A-26B threat included desperate attempts to conceal supply movements and establish decoy convoys to draw American fire. Major Yoshiro Taniguchi of the Japanese Army Intelligence Service devised a plan to create fictitious convoy routes using captured American vehicles and dummy supplies, with the aim of depleting American ammunition and revealing attack patterns. However, the comprehensive American intelligence network swiftly identified these deceptions, and the decoy convoys were largely disregarded in favor of genuine targets identified through signals intelligence and aerial reconnaissance. The strategic influence of the 31st Bombardment Group's operations with the A-26B Invader, though limited to a mere 3 weeks of combat, contributed to the complete immobilization of Japanese logistics in southern Kyushu by early August 1945. This, combined with the extensive mining of Japanese coastal waters by B-29 superfortresses of the 313th Bombardment Wing, the naval blockade maintained by American submarines and surface vessels, and the systematic destruction of Japanese rail networks by tactical aircraft, completed the isolation of Japanese defensive positions from their supply bases. One of the most significant technological innovations incorporated into the A-26B was the K-14 gun sight, a gyroscopic computing sight that automatically calculated the lead angle required for engaging moving targets. Captain Mitchell, like most A-26B pilots, found that the K-14 sight was most effective when employed against ground targets moving predictably along roads or railways, where the sight's computer could accurately predict the target's future position. The sight projected an illuminated reticle onto a reflector glass in front of the pilot, with the aiming point automatically adjusted based on the aircraft's speed, altitude, and angle of attack. The accumulated combat experience of American pilots by mid-1945 afforded them a decisive tactical advantage over Japanese forces. Many of the pilots assigned to the 31st Bombardment Group had completed dozens or even hundreds of combat missions in the Mediterranean theater, engaging German and Italian targets under conditions often more challenging than those encountered in the Pacific. This experience, coupled with intensive training on the A-26B at Columbia Army Air Base, enabled pilots like Captain Mitchell to execute complex attack profiles with precision while maintaining situational awareness of both threats and targets. Private 2 Ishiwa, a survivor of Yamamoto's convoy who had been traveling in one of the rear vehicles that evaded destruction, later recounted in his memoir the terrifying efficiency of the American attack. The aircraft materialized from nowhere, descending from the morning sky like a predator. There was a sound akin to the world being ripped asunder, and the front of our column simply ceased to exist, replaced by fire, smoke, and the cries of dying men. In less time than it takes to inhale, 40 vehicles and 200 men were annihilated. We had encountered American aircraft before, but nothing comparable to this concentrated destruction delivered in a single pass. The logistical network supporting the 31st Bombardment Group's operations from Okinawa represented the culmination of 3 years of American experience in Pacific warfare. Aviation fuel arrived daily via tanker ships from refineries in California and Texas, with each A-26B requiring approximately 800 gallons for a typical mission to Kyushu and back. Ammunition ships delivered millions of rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, with consumption rates during the group's 3 weeks of operations averaging 40,000 rounds per day. Spare parts, including replacement gun barrels, engine components, and electronic equipment, arrived via air transport from supply depots in Hawaii and the continental United States. The intelligence support provided to the 31st Bombardment Group encompassed not only target information, but also detailed weather forecasting, enemy fighter deployment patterns, and anti-aircraft gun positions. Captain James Wilson, the group weather officer, received hourly updates from weather reconnaissance B-29s flying predetermined routes over the Japanese home islands, enabling him to predict with reasonable accuracy the cloud cover, visibility, and wind conditions over target areas. This information was indispensable for planning low-level attacks, where unforeseen weather conditions could force an aircraft into clouds or mountainous terrain with catastrophic consequences. On August 1, 1945, the 31st Bombardment Group launched its most extensive mission to date, with 32 A-26B Invaders targeting the Tuiki Airfield Complex in northern Kyushu. The raid, personally led by Colonel Holtzappel, demonstrated the devastating efficacy of massed invader assaults against fixed installations. Approaching at 15,000 feet to evade detection, the formation divided into 4 8-ship elements that attacked simultaneously from different directions, overwhelming Japanese defenses and precluding coordinated anti-aircraft fire. In less than 3 minutes, the combined firepower of 32 aircraft, each equipped with 14 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns, reduced the airfield to smoldering wreckage, destroying 43 Japanese aircraft on the ground and rendering the runway impassable. Lieutenant Misao Kobayashi, commanding an anti-aircraft battery at Suiki, survived the attack and later described it as apocalyptic in its ferocity. The sky appeared to rain metal as 32 aircraft assailed simultaneously from all vectors. Each aircraft's nose erupted with the flash of multiple guns, and the sound defied description. A continuous roar that drowned out even the explosions of burning aircraft and fuel dumps. Our 25mm guns were rendered useless against such speed and firepower. We managed perhaps 30 rounds before my position was obliterated by concentrated fire from at least 3 aircraft. I survived solely because I was propelled into a drainage ditch by an explosion. The cumulative effect of American air attacks on Japanese morale by August 1945 cannot be overstated. Colonel Saburo Hayashi, serving on the staff of the Japanese 16th Area Army, wrote in his post-war memoir that the emergence of the new American attack bombers with their multiple forward guns provided definitive proof that we could not withstand American material superiority. Our soldiers, already weakened by malnutrition and disease, lost what little fighting spirit remained when they witnessed entire convoys obliterated in mere seconds by a single aircraft. Many openly discussed surrender, a concept unthinkable even 6 months prior. The technical specifications of the A-26B Invader, which rendered it such an effective ground attack platform, extended beyond its armament. The aircraft's structure was engineered to withstand significant combat damage, featuring redundant control systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, and armored protection for the crew compartment. The pilot was situated behind a 64-pound armor plate capable of stopping .50 caliber rounds. While armored glass windows offered protection against shell fragments, the aircraft's twin-engine configuration meant it could return to base on a single engine if the other sustained damage, a capability that saved numerous crews during the group's operations. Maintenance Sergeant Carl Peterson of the 438th Squadron recorded in his diary the challenges of maintaining the A-26B's operational status under the primitive conditions at Macanado Airfield. The coral dust infiltrates everything, particularly the gun mechanisms. We are compelled to disassemble and clean each gun daily, sometimes twice if a mission has been flown. The humidity induces corrosion on any exposed metal within hours. We have jury-rigged canvas shelters over the aircraft to provide some degree of protection, but it is a relentless struggle. The lads flying these machines do not comprehend the extensive hours of maintenance required for each hour of flight time. The radar and electronic systems aboard the A-26B, while rudimentary by later standards, represented cutting-edge technology for 1945. The aircraft was equipped with an AN/APN-1 radar altimeter, which provided precise altitude information during low-level attacks, crucial for maintaining the optimal attack profile while avoiding obstacles. The SCR-522 VHF radio facilitated secure communications with other aircraft and ground control, while the SCR-695 identification friend or foe IFF transponder prevented friendly fire incidents within the congested airspace over Okinawa and southern Japan. Major Harrison, the 31st Bombardment Group's intelligence officer, developed innovative techniques for bomb damage assessment, utilizing the K-17 aerial cameras installed in some A-26Bs. These cameras, triggered automatically when the guns fired, produced a visual record of each attack that could be analyzed to ascertain the effectiveness of different attack profiles and ammunition types. The film from Mitchell's assault on Yamamoto's convoy vividly depicted the devastating impact of concentrated .5 O-caliber fire on lightly armored vehicles, with individual frames capturing trucks, disintegrating under the force of hundreds of rounds. The human aspect of the air war over Japan in the summer of 1945 involved not only the combatants, but also the hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians who found themselves in the path of American attacks. Mrs. Akiko Tanaka, the wife of a farmer living near the mountain pass where Yamamoto's convoy was annihilated, recalled that the noise was terrifying, like incessant thunder. Then came the explosions and the conflagration. The forest burned for 3 days, and the stench of death permeated the air for weeks. We discovered bodies strewn for miles, some so severely burned they were beyond identification. The elders declared it was as if the demons of hell had been unleashed upon us. Technical Sergeant David Murphy, crew chief for Mitchell's aircraft, took immense pride in maintaining what he considered the finest A-26B in the squadron. She is a complex machine with all those guns and systems packed into her sleek frame. The nose guns alone demand constant attention to ensure they remain properly aligned and functional. We have implemented our own modifications, such as adding extra cooling vents for the gun barrels and reinforcing the ammunition feed chutes. Every time she returns from a mission, we meticulously inspect her, searching for any damage or potential points of failure for the next flight. The comparison between the A-26B Invader and its predecessor, the Douglas A-20 Havoc, highlighted the rapid advancements in American aircraft design during World War II. While the A-20 had been an effective attack aircraft equipped with 6 forward-firing .50 caliber guns, its maximum speed of 275 miles per hour and limited range rendered it increasingly vulnerable to improved Japanese anti-aircraft defenses. The A-26B's maximum speed of 359 miles per hour, combined with its 14 forward-firing guns and enhanced armor protection, represented a quantum leap in ground attack capability that Japanese forces were simply unprepared to counter. Captain Hiroshi Yada, a Japanese fighter pilot flying a Nakajima Ki 84 Hi-84 from Koya Airfield, encountered a formation of A-26Bs on August 5, 1945, and narrowly escaped with his life. I dove on what I believed to be a single bomber detached from its formation. However, as I closed the firing range, the aircraft's tail seemed to erupt with tracers from the remote turrets. I immediately disengaged, but not before sustaining several hits to my engine. As I climbed away trailing smoke, I observed the aircraft's nose ignite as it strafed a train below. The concentration of fire was unlike anything I had witnessed. The entire train appeared to explode simultaneously. I barely managed to return to base and never flew again before the war's conclusion. The psychological warfare impact of the A-26B extended beyond its actual destructive potential. Japanese propaganda, which had initially dismissed American assertions about the new attack bomber as hyperbole, was compelled to acknowledge the threat following numerous devastating assaults on supply convoys and airfields. Radio Tokyo, in a broadcast on August 8, 1945, cautioned Japanese civilians to seek immediate shelter if they sighted twin-engine aircraft with solid noses, inadvertently confirming the A-26B's effectiveness and further eroding already fragile morale. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Anderson, operations officer for the 31st Bombardment Group, orchestrated the intricate mission, planning necessary to maximize the A-26B's effectiveness while minimizing casualties. Each mission necessitated detailed coordination with fighter escorts from the 31st Fighter Group's P-47N Thunderbolts based at Aishima, naval rescue forces positioned along the flight paths, and air-sea rescue squadrons prepared to recover downed crews. The fact that the 31st suffered no aircraft losses to enemy action during their 3 weeks of combat operations testified to both the efficacy of this planning and the overwhelming American air superiority by the summer of 1945. The supply chain supporting operations from Okinawa stretched across the Pacific to factories in the United States. The manufacturing facilities of the Browning Arms Company, situated in Connecticut, alongside the High Standard Manufacturing Corporation, also located within Connecticut, were responsible for the creation of the IN/M250 caliber machine guns. Wartime production saw an impressive output, reaching monthly figures exceeding 5,000 units. The Frankfurt Arsenal, based in Pennsylvania, and the Lake City Ordnance Plant in Missouri undertook the immense task of producing the billions of rounds of ammunition expended by American aircraft operating in the Pacific Theater. These facilities dedicated specialized production lines to the manufacture of armor-piercing incendiary and incendiary rounds, which proved exceptionally effective against Japanese targets. Master Sergeant Takashi Fukuda, one of the scarce Japanese military intelligence specialists who survived the conflict, conducted a post-war evaluation of American ground assault strategies for the Allied occupation authorities. His comprehensive report highlighted the A-26B Invader as the definitive embodiment of American tactical aviation doctrine. This aircraft masterfully combined maximum offensive power with exceptional speed and survivability, resulting in a combat machine capable of neutralizing any ground target with minimal peril to its aircrew. He concluded that Japan's inability to devise effective countermeasures against American ground attack aircraft, particularly the heavily armed variants like the A-26B, was a significant contributor to the breakdown of Japanese logistical capabilities in the concluding months of the war. The mission undertaken on the 9th day of August, 1945, during which crews from the 319th witnessed the atomic cloud erupting over Nagasaki, served as a pivotal moment not only in the war, but in the annals of human history. Captain Mitchell, en route back from an assault on the Kanoya airfield, later recalled, "We had just concluded strafing some Japanese aircraft on the ground when this colossal cloud materialized to the northwest. It continued to ascend, reaching an estimated 40,000 feet or more. Some of the men speculated it was a volcanic eruption, but it bore no resemblance to any volcanic event I had ever observed. Upon landing and learning about the atomic bomb, everything became clear. We understood then that the war was over." In the immediate aftermath of Japan's announcement of surrender, on the 15th day of August, 1945, the 319th Bombardment Group was making preparations for what would have constituted their most extensive mission to date, a coordinated strike targeting Japanese military installations surrounding Kagoshima. Colonel Holtzapfel had briefed 40 crews for a maximum effort operation scheduled for the 16th of August. However, news of the surrender reached Okinawa just as the aircraft were undergoing armament and refueling procedures. The abrupt transition from active combat operations to the responsibilities of occupation duties left many crew members with a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at having survived the war was coupled with an unusual sense of anticlimax following the intense nature of combat engagements. The technical influence of the A-26B Invader extended well beyond the conclusion of World War II, with the aircraft subsequently serving in conflicts in Korea, Indochina, and numerous other engagements throughout the 1960s. The concept of a dedicated ground attack aircraft featuring maximum forward-facing armament directly influenced the design of subsequent aircraft, such as the Douglas A, one Sky Raider, and, ultimately, the Fairchild Republic A, 10 Thunderbolt II, which was equipped with a 30mm cannon possessing the capability to destroy modern tanks. The lessons learned from the devastating effectiveness of the A-26B against ground targets, specifically that concentrated automatic weapons fire delivered in a single pass could yield decisive tactical outcomes, became a foundational principle of American close air support doctrine. A statistical review of the 319th Bombardment Group's combat sorties originating from Okinawa revealed the remarkable proficiency of the A-26B in its ground attack role. Across 22 missions flown between the 16th day of July and the 14th day of August, 1945, the group's aircraft were credited with destroying or damaging an estimated 412 vehicles, 63 locomotives, 291 railway cars, 43 aircraft on the ground, and a multitude of buildings and military infrastructure. This extensive destruction was achieved with the significant accomplishment of 0 aircraft lost due to enemy action. Although 3 A-26Bs sustained minor damage from anti-aircraft fire, and 1 aircraft experienced an engine malfunction necessitating an emergency landing at Ishima. Lieutenant General Masakazu Kawabe, who commanded the Air General Army responsible for defending Japan against American aerial assaults, testified post-war that the introduction of the A-26B Invader during the summer of 1945 represented a qualitative shift in American ground attack capabilities, for which Japanese forces were entirely unprepared. Our anti-aircraft defenses, already insufficient against conventional fighters and bombers, proved utterly ineffective against aircraft capable of attacking at high speeds, with such concentrated destructive power. A single aircraft could now accomplish what previously required an entire squadron. Coupled with the enemy's complete air supremacy and seemingly inexhaustible supplies of ammunition and fuel, these new attack bombers rendered any daylight movement virtually suicidal. The personal accounts of the airmen who flew and maintained the A-26Bs of the 319th Bombardment Group provided a human perspective on the technological superiority embodied by the aircraft. The navigator for Second Lieutenant Thompson Mitchell meticulously kept a diary of his missions, which survived the war. His entry for the 28th day of July, 1945, states, "Hit a convoy in the mountains this morning. The destruction was absolute. Counted over 40 burning vehicles after our pass. The concentrated fire from our 14 forward guns is a sight to behold, like a solid stream of tracers reaching out to obliterate whatever we are targeting. The Japs never stood a chance." War is hell, but at least we are inflicting more damage than we are receiving. The maintenance challenges confronting the ground crews of the 319th Bombardment Group at Machinado Airfield extended beyond the inherent mechanical complexity of the A-26B, encompassing the logistical hurdles of operating from a recently captured Japanese airfield. The coral runways, while functional for operations, generated significant quantities of abrasive dust, which accelerated engine wear and necessitated frequent filter replacements. Potable water for engine cooling during ground runs was a scarce commodity, requiring an intricate system of siphons and pumps to recirculate the precious liquid. Electrical power for maintenance activities was supplied by portable generators that operated continuously, their noise contributing to the din of an active airfield. Private First Class Kenji Morimoto, one of the few survivors from the anti-aircraft batteries attempting to counter the A-26B assaults, offered a unique insight into the aircraft's efficacy. "We had trained for years to engage American aircraft," he stated, "but nothing prepared us for the speed and firepower of these new bombers. They would appear suddenly, diving from altitude at speeds our guns could not track. The barrage of fire from their nose guns would obliterate everything in its path before we could even aim our weapons. In my battery of 6 guns, I was the sole survivor after a single strafing run. the psychological impact was devastating. Many gunners simply abandoned their positions when these aircraft appeared. The broader strategic context of the 319th Bombardment Group's operations during July and August of 1945 involved preparations for Operation Olympic, the planned invasion of Kyushu slated for November 1945. Military strategists anticipated casualties exceeding 1 million American soldiers, with many times that number of Japanese military personnel and civilians expected to perish. The systematic demolition of Japanese logistical and transportation networks by aircraft, like the A-26B Invader, was intended to isolate and weaken Japanese defensive positions in anticipation of the invasion, thereby potentially reducing American casualties during the amphibious assault and subsequent ground engagements. Sergeant Anderson, the gunner aboard Mitchell's aircraft, provided a distinctive perspective on the A-26B's combat operations from his vantage point, controlling the remotely operated turrets. "The periscope system took some getting accustomed to," he explained. "But once you mastered it, you could track targets smoothly from end to end. We didn't encounter many enemy fighters during our missions. They were being reserved for the invasion. But the few that attempted to intercept us received a rather unpleasant surprise from our turret guns." The true spectacle, however, was at the front. When the captain unleashed all 14 forward guns, the entire aircraft would shudder, and you could see the tracers extending like tendrils of death towards whatever we were attacking. The industrial infrastructure underpinning the production of the A-26B Invader exemplified American manufacturing at its wartime zenith. The facility employed over 40,000 workers at its peak, operating 24 hours a day across 3 shifts to meet production quotas. The assembly line for the A-26B extended for nearly a quarter of a mile, featuring specialized stations for the installation of engines, armament, electronics, and control systems. Quality control inspectors meticulously examined every rivet, wire, and component to ensure that aircraft delivered to combat units adhered to the exacting standards essential for survival in operational theaters. Colonel Tetsuo Yamamoto, unrelated to the convoy commander, and serving as a staff officer at Imperial General Headquarters, analyzed the repercussions of American aerial bombardments on Japan's defensive preparations in a post-war report. The systematic destruction of our transportation network by American aircraft, particularly the new, heavily armed attack bombers introduced in the summer of 1945, rendered it impossible to implement our defensive strategy for Ketsu-Go, Operation Decision. Without the capacity to redeploy reserves, ammunition, and supplies, our elaborate beach defenses would have been isolated and systematically dismantled. The concentrated firepower of aircraft like the A-26B could obliterate in mere minutes what had taken months to construct. The technological sophistication of the A-26B extended to its communication and navigation apparatus. The aircraft was equipped with the STR-269 radio compass, enabling navigation by allowing pilots to lock onto radio beacons even in adverse weather conditions. The BC-453 high-frequency receiver facilitated long-range communication with base operations at Okinawa, while the interphone system allowed the 3 crew members to converse despite the ambient noise from engines, weapons, and airflow. These systems, though rudimentary by contemporary standards, represented the cutting edge of 1945 technology and conferred a significant advantage upon American air crews in coordinating complex missions. Flight Sergeant Yoshio Ito, one of the few Japanese fighter pilots to successfully engage an A-26B and survive, recounted his encounter on the 11th day of August, 1945. "I was piloting a Ki-61 Hien when I observed a twin-engine aircraft attacking a supply depot near Kumamoto. I initiated a dive from above and behind, adopting a classic attack posture. However, as I closed to firing range, the aircraft's upper turret swiveled towards me and unleashed fire. I witnessed the muzzle flashes from the twin guns and felt immediate impacts on my aircraft. I fired a brief burst and broke away, but my engine was damaged and ablaze. As I struggled to maintain control, I observed the American aircraft pulling up from its attack run, leaving the entire supply depot engulfed in flames. I managed a crash landing in a rice paddy and survived, but my aircraft was destroyed. The human toll exacted by the war's final aerial engagements was staggering for Japanese forces. Medical records from Japanese military hospitals in Kyushu documented the horrific injuries inflicted by 50 caliber weapons, with traumatic amputations, severe internal trauma, and extensive burns being commonplace among survivors of strafing attacks. Dr. Akira Suzuki, chief surgeon at the Kagoshima Army Hospital, noted that the large caliber rounds inflicted injuries far exceeding those caused by small arms fire, frequently necessitating immediate amputation of damaged limbs to preserve life. The hospital's limited reserves of morphine, antibiotics, and blood plasma were rapidly depleted, treating casualties from aerial assaults, leaving many wounded to endure agonizing pain and inadequate medical care. The final mission undertaken by the 319th Bombardment Group prior to Japan's surrender was a reconnaissance flight on the 14th day of August, 1945, aimed at detecting any indicators of Japanese military activity that might suggest defiance of the surrender directive. Captain Mitchell, piloting his last combat mission of the war, led a formation of 4 A-26Bs on a low-level reconnaissance sweep of southern Kyushu, prepared to engage any hostile forces encountered. The flight met no resistance, encountering only disused airfields, deserted roadways, and the scattered remnants of prior assaults. The war that had claimed millions of lives was finally drawing to a close, its conclusion hastened, in part, by the overwhelming technological superiority embodied by aircraft, such as the A-26B Invader. Post-war assessments by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey concluded that the interdiction of Japanese ground transportation by tactical aircraft played a critical role in the collapse of Japanese resistance. The survey specifically emphasized that aircraft equipped with multiple forward-firing armaments, such as the A-26B with its 14.50 caliber machine guns, were exceptionally effective in destroying vehicle convoys and rail traffic while minimizing expenditure of aircraft and crew resources. The concentrated firepower delivered in a single pass reduced exposure to anti-aircraft fire while ensuring target obliteration, a tactical lesson that would shape American military aviation doctrine for decades to come. The impact of Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto's destroyed convoy extended beyond its immediate tactical significance. The systematic dismantling of Japanese logistical networks compelled military commanders to make untenable choices between defending coastal regions against invasion and maintaining reserves in interior positions. Without reliable transportation infrastructure, Japanese forces were effectively immobilized, incapable of responding to American incursions or reinforcing imperiled positions. The 47 trucks annihilated in a single 4.7-second burst from an A-26B's 14 guns represented not merely a loss of material, but a critical failure in Japan's capacity to sustain military operations. Squadron leader Frank Mitchell of the Royal Air Force, assigned to the 319th Bombardment Group as an observer, offered an external viewpoint on American ground attack methodologies. The concentration of firepower achieved by the A-26B was extraordinary, he remarked. In Europe, we considered the Typhoon, with its 420mm cannon, to be heavily armed, but the Invader's 14.50 caliber guns delivered devastating destructive potential with remarkable precision. The American approach of overwhelming firepower, delivered in a single pass, minimized aircraft losses while maximizing target destruction. This was a lesson we brought back to the RAF for integration into our own tactical doctrine. The technological preeminence demonstrated by the A-26B Invader during the summer of 1945 transcended mere advancements in engineering and industrial output. It represented the culmination of 3 years of intense combat experience in the Pacific, during which American forces had learned, through hard-won lessons, the paramount importance of speed, firepower, and survivability in the ground attack role. Every enhancement, from the elevated canopy designed for improved visibility to the synchronized armament of 14 guns, addressed specific shortcomings identified in combat. The outcome was an aircraft perfectly suited to its mission, the eradication of Japanese ground forces with minimal risk to American air crews. As the sun dipped below the horizon on the 15th day of August, 1945, marking the cessation of World War II, the personnel of the 319th Bombardment Group convened at Makinato Airfield to commemorate their survival and mourn their fallen comrades. Although the group had sustained no combat fatalities during their 3 weeks of operations with the A-26B, they had previously lost friends and companions during their campaigns in the Mediterranean. The A-26B Invader, with its distinctive solid nose bristling with gun barrels, had firmly established itself as one of the most formidable ground attack aircraft of the war. Its 14 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns possessed the capability to obliterate entire Japanese formations in a single, devastating pass. The narrative of the A-26B Invaders' brief yet decisive combat tenure in the Pacific serves as a stark reminder of the brutal efficiency of modern warfare. In a mere 22 missions spread over 3 weeks, a single bombardment group, equipped with these aircraft, inflicted destruction that would have required entire armies in prior conflicts. The concentrated firepower of 14 synchronized machine guns, delivered with precision at high velocity, represented a revolution in tactical air power that Japanese forces, despite their valor and resolve, were simply incapable of countering. The smoldering wreckage of Lieutenant Colonel Yamamoto's convoy, annihilated in less than 5 seconds by a solitary aircraft, stood as a testament to the overwhelming technological superiority that contributed to the conclusion of World War II.